They told the girl who never fit in that her 10-year high school reunion was going to be a night to remember. They had no idea how right they were, because she showed up as the architect behind the most talked-about building in the country. And the woman who spent a decade making her life small finally made herself impossible to ignore. Before the story begins, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. 10 years ago, Rosalind Ashby. Wait, no, that name's taken. 10 years ago, Cleo Vance walked out of Hargrove High with paint-stained sneakers, a rolled-up portfolio under her arm, and the distinct sensation that the entire senior class was relieved to see her go. She was the girl who sketched buildings during lunch instead of talking to people, who wore her hair in a bun held together by a pencil, who once spent 45 minutes explaining to anyone who would listen why the school gymnasium's load-bearing walls were structurally irresponsible. No one listened. Most people laughed. The worst of them was Preston. Wait. The worst of them was Kyle Beaumont. Student body president, varsity lacrosse, every hall waited for him like the Red Sea. He had a talent for finding the exact thing a person was most proud of and making it sound ridiculous. When Cleo won the regional design competition junior year, Kyle announced it over the lunch table with a slow clap. "Our future interior decorator, everybody." The table laughed. Cleo smiled like it didn't land. It landed. She left Hargrove the morning after graduation and didn't look back until now. Because Cleo Vance was back, and nobody in this town had any idea that the woman who had just pulled into the parking lot of the Hargrove Community Center, dark blazer, portfolio case, 10 years of quiet determination behind her eyes, was the same girl who used to eat lunch in the drafting room alone. No one knew she had designed Meridian Tower, the glass and steel structure on the Portland waterfront, that every architecture magazine in the country had called a revelation. No one knew her firm had just been shortlisted for a federal cultural center commission worth $42 million. No one knew any of it because Cleo Vance had never once posted about her life online. Not a word, not a photo, nothing. She liked it that way. What she did not like was the parking meter. Cleo fed it a quarter. The meter beeped, flashed an error code, and went dark. She stared at it. "Okay?" She stepped back, as if distance might help. She fed another quarter. Same beep, same error. She tilted her head and looked at the little digital screen like it personally owed her an explanation. "I'm giving you legal tender. This is currency recognized by the federal government. What exactly is your objection?" The meter did not respond. "I've been in this parking lot for 4 minutes and you've already taken 2 quarters and given me nothing." She looked around to make sure no one was watching, then gave the meter a very firm tap on the side. "Nothing." A voice came from behind her. "It's broken. Has been for about a week." Cleo turned. The man standing a few feet away had the kind of face that made you forget what you were about to say. Dark eyes, easy posture, a jacket that looked like it had been through a lot of weather. He was holding a paper coffee cup and watching her with the expression of someone who had been genuinely enjoying the show. "How long have you been standing there?" Cleo asked. "Long enough to hear your argument about legal tender." She straightened up. It was a valid argument. It was. He nodded, completely serious. The meter was wrong. Cleo looked at him. He looked back. There was something in his face, not amusement exactly, but something quieter, like a person who found the world more interesting than he let on. "There's a lot at the end of the block," he said. "Free after 6. It's 5:47. Then you have 13 minutes to kill." He glanced at the community center. "Are you here for the reunion?" Cleo looked at the banner above the entrance. Hargrove High, 10 years later, welcome back. Silver and blue, which were somehow still the school colors even though both shades looked terrible together. "Unfortunately," she said. He smiled at that. "Just a little. Me too." She looked at him again. Something familiar. Not the face exactly, but the quality of stillness. Like a person who had learned to take up less space and then unlearned it. "I'm Cleo," she said. "Everett," he said. They shook hands. His grip was steady. His coffee cup said the name of a place called Birchwood Roasters, which she had never heard of. "Is that local?" she asked, nodding at the cup. "New place. 2 blocks from the old library." He looked down at it. "They got the ratio wrong, but I didn't say anything because the woman at the counter seemed proud of it." Cleo blinked. "You paid for bad coffee to spare someone's feelings." "I paid for bad coffee because saying this ratio is off to a person who is clearly running her first week on the job felt like kicking a very small bird." Something in Cleo's chest did a small, unexpected thing. Like a window opening that she hadn't realized was closed. "That's very decent of you," she said. "It's terrible coffee though," he added. "I want to be honest about that." She laughed, actually laughed, which surprised her, because she had been dreading this entire evening since the invitation arrived 3 weeks ago in an envelope that smelled faintly of Kyle Beaumont's self-importance. A burst of noise came from the entrance as a group of former classmates pushed through the doors. Cleo's shoulders went up slightly. Instinct, Everett noticed. He didn't say anything about it, just tilted his head toward the far end of the lot. 13 minutes, he said. And there's a bench by the old fountain if you'd rather not go in yet. She would very much rather not go in yet. Lead the way, she said. The fountain had been broken since at least 2009. But the bench beside it was solid and the September air was cool without being cold. Cleo set her portfolio case down and sat. Everett sat beside her, leaving a polite distance, and looked out at the street like someone who was comfortable with silence. She had forgotten there were people like that. "Why'd you come back?" he asked after a moment. Not pushy, just curious. Cleo looked at her hands. "I keep asking myself the same thing, and I think I got tired of being afraid of a zip code." Everett turned to look at her. She got the sense he was actually listening, not just waiting for his turn to talk. "You?" she asked. He was quiet for a moment. "Unfinished business, the vague kind or the specific kind?" "The specific kind." He looked down at the coffee cup. "The kind that's been sitting on a shelf for 10 years collecting dust." Lou nodded. She understood that. She understood it more than she wanted to. Her phone buzzed. A notification from the reunion's event page. "Kyle Beaumont has been confirmed as tonight's MC. Get ready for a night to remember." There was a photo attached. Kyle in a blazer that was almost certainly rented, grinning into a camera with the confidence of a man who had peaked early and was deeply committed to the idea that peaking early was fine. She turned the phone face down on the bench. "Someone you were hoping not to see?" Everett asked. "Someone I was fully expecting to see," Cleo said. "That's almost worse." He looked at the phone and then at her face and made the very wise decision not to ask. Instead he said, "Tell me something good." She blinked. "What?" "Something good from the last 10 years. One thing." Cleo thought about it. "I designed a building that made a woman cry. In a good way or a bad way?" "Good way." She said it made her feel like the sky was inside. Cleo paused. She was 83 years old and she stood in the lobby for 20 minutes and just looked up. Everett was quiet for a moment. Then, "That's a good thing. It was the best thing," Cleo said. And she meant it completely. They sat there while the light went gold and the 13 minutes ran out. And Cleo thought, for the first time all day, that maybe tonight wouldn't be entirely terrible. She would be wrong about that, but not for the reasons she expected. Inside the community center, the Hargrove High 10-year reunion was doing its best impression of a television show about reunions. String lights, a DJ who was playing 2010 hits at a volume that made conversation technically possible but emotionally exhausting, and tables with little centerpieces that someone had worked very hard on and no one was looking at. Cleo navigated through the crowd with the portfolio case tucked under her arm like armor. She had almost made it to the far wall when she heard him. Cleo Vance. Kyle Beaumont had not changed so much as intensified. He was taller in her memory somehow, but the smile was exactly the same, the one that always made her feel like she was slightly behind on a joke everyone else already understood. "Kyle," she said, "you actually came." He opened his arms as if she'd done him a personal favor. "I honestly wasn't sure you'd show. Here I am, here you are." His eyes moved to the portfolio case. "Still carrying that thing around? Still designing buildings, yes." He laughed, which she had always found remarkable, the ability to dismiss something and laugh at it simultaneously. "That's great. That's really, I mean, what are you doing these days, really?" Before she could answer, his attention slid sideways to Everett, who had appeared at her left. Kyle's smile flickered, just for a moment. Not much, barely anything, but Cleo caught it. "Hey," Kyle said. "I didn't know you two knew each other. We met tonight," Everett said. His voice was perfectly pleasant. "Well," Kyle recovered quickly, because Kyle always recovered quickly. "Tonight's gonna be good. I've been putting together a little presentation, a walk down memory lane, you know, some highlights, some unforgettable moments." He looked at Cleo when he said unforgettable. "You're going to want to stick around for it." He walked away before either of them could respond. Cleo stared at the back of his head. "I don't like the way he said that, I noticed." He said unforgettable like it was a threat. He did. Everett was watching Kyle move through the crowd, and something in his expression had gone very still. Cleo turned to look at him. "Do you know what he's planning?" Everett picked up a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray and looked at it for a moment. "I have a guess. Care to share it?" He looked at her, and there was something in his face that she hadn't seen before. Not quite sadness, not quite anger, but the particular exhaustion of someone who had been carrying something a long time. "Let me make sure first," he said. Can I find you in about 20 minutes? I'll be the one arguing with the coat check, Cleo said. He almost smiled. Then he walked away into the crowd. Cleo stood there, holding her sparkling water, feeling the distinct sensation that the evening had just shifted direction entirely. She did not know yet what she was walking into, but somewhere in the back of her mind a small alarm was sounding. The coat check, as predicted, had opinions. The woman behind the counter, a teenager who looked like she would rather be anywhere else on Earth, which Cleo respected, had a system that she refused to deviate from. Portfolio cases were not coats, coats were coats. Portfolio cases could go in the corner. What corner? Cleo asked. The teenager pointed at a vague area behind her. That's not a corner, Cleo said. That's a suggestion. The teenager stared at her. I'm an architect, Cleo said. I know corners. This did not help. She was still negotiating when she overheard the conversation happening 4 feet to her left, between two men she didn't recognize and Kyle's friend, a broad-shouldered guy named Wade who had always followed Kyle around like punctuation. The slideshow is locked in, Wade was saying. Kyle added the new photos this afternoon. The ones from junior year? The other man lowered his voice. Yeah. And the video. Which video? You know which video? Cleo went very still. He's going to let it play right in the middle of the thing. Right when? He said it'll be during the most memorable moments segment. Is that a good idea? Wade shrugged. Kyle thinks so. Cleo set the portfolio case against the wall with great care and walked directly to the women's restroom, where she locked herself in a stall, pulled out her phone, and opened her contacts. She did not have Everett's number. She hadn't thought to get his number. She closed her eyes and had a very brief, very private conversation with herself about the importance of exchanging contact information with people. Then she unlocked the stall, looked at herself in the mirror, and said, "Okay, find him. This is happening." What she found first, instead, was the story. She found it because Margaret Ossie, former yearbook editor, current kindergarten teacher, the kind of person who remembered everyone and kept it to herself, was standing by the punch bowl looking troubled. "Cleo," she said, "can I ask you something?" "Sure." Margaret glanced around, then lowered her voice. "Did you know Kyle sent an invitation to Everett?" Cleo felt something cold settle into her stomach. "What do you mean?" "I mean Kyle specifically tracked him down and sent him a personal invitation." "Which is?" "Cleo, you remember what happened senior year, at the winter formal." Cleo had not been at the winter formal. She was home with a sketchbook, and what she'd told people was a cold. But she'd heard things, secondhand and sideways. She'd heard enough. "Tell me," she said. Margaret pressed her lips together. Kyle announced to the whole school that Everett had been rejected from every architecture program he applied to. He put it on the announcement board, with a printout. He said it was sharing the news, but it wasn't. It was deliberate. Everett had told someone in confidence, and Kyle found out. She paused. Everett left the formal early. He barely came to school the rest of the year. The cold thing in Cleo's stomach got colder, and Kyle invited him back because Kyle found something else. Margaret's voice dropped further. "I don't know what it is, but he's been going around telling people tonight we'll have a special throwback moment, and he keeps looking at Everett's direction whenever he says it." Cleo looked across the room. Everett was standing near the far wall, looking at something on his phone. She could see the set of his shoulders, careful, controlled, the posture of someone who had learned to look calm. She knew that posture. She had worn it for years. She moved through the crowd without stopping to talk to anyone, which required a level of social evasion she had not used since college, and reached Everett in under 2 minutes. "I need to tell you something," she said. He looked up. His expression shifted. "What happened?" "I overheard Wade talking about a slideshow, something Kyle put together. He's calling it a memorable moments segment, and it has something from senior year." Everett was quiet. "Do you know what it is?" she asked. He looked across the room to where Kyle was holding court near the DJ booth, microphone already in hand, 2 hours early. "I have a good idea," he said. Everett. He looked at her. "I know about the announcement board," she said quietly. "The winter formal." Something moved across his face. Not embarrassment. Something older than that. The expression of a person revisiting a wound they thought they'd finished with. "I came back because I wanted to close a door," he said. "Not run from it anymore. I understand that." She meant it. But there's a difference between closing a door and walking into a room where someone has rigged the ceiling to fall on you. He almost smiled. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting," Cleo said, "that we find out exactly what he's planning and stay 2 steps ahead of it." Everett looked at her. Then he looked at the DJ booth, then back at her. "You're an architect," he said. "Do you always assess structural risks before entering a room?" "Every single time," she said. "Let's go." Across the room, Kyle Beaumont was preparing for the best night of his life. He had planned this for 3 months. The slideshow was perfect. 62 slides, music timed to the photos, a special segment he called Where Are They Now that was going to be very instructive for certain people. He had a new photo of Everett from 6 months ago, pulled from a professional directory that hadn't been updated to reflect his current situation. The caption was already written. It was going to land like a thunderclap. His friend Wade appeared at his elbow. "You sure about this?" "Positive, I'm just saying." Everett looked different than I expected. He always looked like that. Quiet, serious. Like he's better than everyone. "I don't know," Wade said. He doesn't seem worried." Kyle adjusted his microphone. "That's because he doesn't know what's coming." He smiled, checked his reflection in the dark screen behind him, and decided that tonight the right person was in charge. He had no idea how wrong he was. By the time Kyle tapped the microphone and called the room to attention, Cleo had learned 3 things. The first was that the slideshow was controlled from a laptop on a table near the back, operated by Kyle's other friend, a nervous man named Troy who kept checking his phone. The second was that Troy had left his station twice in the last 40 minutes, once for the bathroom, once for the dessert table, and both times had left the laptop open and unattended. The third was that Everett, standing beside her, had the quiet focus of someone who had made a decision and was no longer afraid of it. "Ladies and gentlemen," Kyle said into the microphone, "welcome back to Hargrove." Polite applause. A few whoops from the table nearest the bar. 10 years, Kyle continued. A lot has changed. Some of us have had incredible journeys. He paused. And some of us, well, the journey is the interesting part. Cleo felt Everett go very still beside her. "Before we get to our main celebration, I want to share something I put together. A little walk down memory lane. Our most memorable moments of Hargrove High." He smiled at the room. "Some of you are going to really enjoy this." The screen behind him flickered to life, and then Everett walked forward. Not quickly, not dramatically, just steadily, through the middle of the room while everyone was looking at the screen. He walked to the laptop table, said something quietly to Troy, and held out his hand. Troy looked at him, looked at the screen, looked at Kyle, who hadn't noticed yet. Troy closed the laptop. The screen went dark. Kyle turned. "Technical difficulty," Troy said, not making eye contact with anyone. Kyle stared at the blank screen, stared at Everett, opened his mouth. "Kyle," Everett said. His voice carried without effort, the way voices do when a room has gone completely silent. "It's been a while." The room, which had been buzzing a moment ago, was holding its breath. Kyle tried to recover. He was good at recovering. "Everett, I know what was on that slideshow," Everett said. "And I know why you sent me an invitation." Kyle gripped the microphone. "I don't know what you think. I think you found an old directory listing," Everett said, "and you wanted to make a point about where I ended up." He looked at Kyle with something that was almost patience. "Here's the thing. You were right 10 years ago. I didn't get into a single architecture program I applied to." The room was very quiet. "I was devastated," Everett said. "I spent a year working construction because I couldn't afford anything else and didn't know what else to do. And you put my rejection letters on the announcement board with my name on them, and the entire school read them." Kyle's face was doing something complicated. "I left," Everett said. "Not just the formal. I left the version of myself that believed that what you thought of me mattered." He tilted his head slightly. Longer than it should have. Someone near the back set a glass down very quietly. "I went back to school at 24, Everett said. "Night classes, one at a time. I got my degree at 28. I got my license at 31. He paused. "I'm a licensed structural engineer. I've worked on 14 commercial projects in the last 4 years, including the Meridian Tower Commission in Portland, which," he glanced across the room at Cleo, "I understand was designed by someone in this room." Every head turned. Cleo, who had absolutely not been expecting that, stood very still. "I was the structural lead," Everett said. "Cleo Vance was the architect, the woman who made an 83-year-old cry in the lobby." He looked back at Kyle. "That's where I ended up." The silence held for one more beat. Then Margaret started clapping. Slowly at first, then joined by half the room in the space of 10 seconds. Kyle stood at the front of the room with a microphone in his hand and nothing left to say. The slideshow was closed. The room had turned. His moment of triumph had become something else entirely, and there was no version of the next 5 minutes that worked for him. Wade, to his credit, appeared at his side and gently took the microphone away. "Maybe some music," Wade said quietly. The DJ, reading the room, put something soft and non-confrontational on. Kyle walked to the back of the room and stood by the door for a moment. Then he walked through it. Cleo found Everett by the same broken fountain 20 minutes later. "You knew," she said. He turned. What? You knew about Meridian. You knew I designed it. He was quiet for a moment. I've been following your work for 6 years, he said. You were the only architect in our graduating class. I wanted to see what you built. 6 years, she repeated. I almost reached out when the Meridian Commission was announced. I was on the structural team already, and I saw your name on the design. He paused. I didn't know how to start that conversation. Cleo looked at him. The September air was doing the thing where it smells like leaves and something ending and something starting simultaneously. You could have said, I'm the structural engineer on a building you designed, she said. That seemed very forward. It's factually correct. Factually correct and emotionally terrifying are not mutually exclusive. Cleo laughed despite herself. Fair point. She sat down on the bench. After a moment, he sat beside her. The same polite distance as before, which felt different now, not distance but care. Why did you really come back? She asked. Not the thing you said before, the real answer. Everett looked at the fountain. Because a very irritating part of my brain has spent 10 years thinking about Kyle Beaumont, and I wanted to stop. He paused. Not to confront him, just to stand in the same room and see that he's just a person. That the thing he did was real, but he's not the size he was in my head. And he's significantly smaller than he was in my head. Everett looked sideways at her. How about you? Cleo thought about it honestly. I think I came back to prove something, she said. Which is a terrible reason to go anywhere. But I think I also came back because I wanted to see if Hargrove was still. If it was still the place that made me feel like I was too much and not enough at the same time. Is it? No, she said, and realized as she said it that she meant it. It's just a town. It's just a community center with bad string lights and a DJ playing songs from 2010. The centerpieces were actually nice, Everett said. I missed the centerpieces. They had small blueprints on them. Little paper ones. Cleo turned to look at him. They had blueprints? Architectural drawings. I think someone on the committee knew about your career. She stared at him. Margaret? Probably Margaret. Cleo looked at the community center doors, then back at the fountain, then at her hands. This night did not go how I expected, in a good way or a bad way. She thought about the parking meter, the bad coffee, the bench, the slideshow that didn't play, the moment Everett said her name in front of a silent room and the 83-year-old woman and the way she felt when he did. Good way, she said, I think. Mostly. Her phone buzzed. She looked at it. A text from an unknown number. This is Everett. Margaret gave me your number. I apologize for the lack of warning. I wanted to ask if you'd want to get actual coffee sometime, not the Birchwood Roasters ratio, which remains incorrect, somewhere better. Cleo looked up from the phone. Everett was not looking at her. He was looking at the fountain with an expression that was carefully neutral and absolutely not pulling it off. You texted me, she said, while sitting 2 feet away from me. I didn't know how to start the conversation. You could have said it. Emotionally terrifying, he said, in the exact same tone as before. Cleo looked at the text, looked at him, looked at the dark fountain. The coffee place on Clement Street is good, she said. They get the ratio right. He turned. Something in his face shifted. Not dramatically, not a movie moment, just a quiet settling, like a building finding its footing. Yeah. She pocketed her phone. But not tonight. Tonight I want to go back in and look at the blueprints on the centerpieces. That's very reasonable. And I want to introduce you to Margaret properly, because apparently she's been running a covert operation on my behalf and she deserves acknowledgement. He stood up and offered her a hand. She took it. His hand was steady, the same as his handshake, the same as his voice in front of a silent room. They walked back toward the entrance. The string lights were warm in the windows. The music had switched to something slower. The door opened on the first try. Cleo stopped just inside the threshold and looked around. At the room she had dreaded for 3 weeks, at the people she had outgrown but not forgotten, at the small paper blueprints on every table she hadn't noticed when she walked in. Hey, Everett said beside her. You okay? Yeah, she said. I really am, and she was, for the first time in 10 years, standing in the place that had made her small, not feeling small at all. She was 32 years old. She had made a woman cry in a lobby. She had a business card that said Principal Architect in a font she had chosen herself, and the structural engineer who had built the bones of her best work was standing close enough that she could hear him breathing. The reunion still had 2 hours left. Cleo Vance decided to stay. 3 weeks later, she was on the phone with Margaret, who was saying, I told you the blueprints were a good idea, in the tone of a person who expected no argument. You were right, Cleo said. You're always right. It's extremely annoying. I'm a kindergarten teacher, Margaret said. Being right is a survival skill. Outside Cleo's window, Portland was doing its October thing. Gray sky, orange trees, a light rain that made everything smell like the beginning of something. She had a deadline in 4 hours and a coffee that was finally, for the first time in recent memory, the correct ratio. She had made it herself, in the kitchen of the apartment she'd lived in for 3 years and was only just starting to feel like hers. Her phone buzzed with a text. She already knew who it was. "The Clement Street place has a new pastry situation. You should probably investigate." She typed back, "Professionally or personally?" The reply came fast. "Yes." She smiled at the phone in the way that was becoming a habit. The kind of smile that surprised her still, because she hadn't expected any of this. She hadn't expected the parking meter, or the bench, or the bad coffee, or the room going quiet, or a man saying her name like it was something he'd been saving. She hadn't expected to stop running from a zip code and find something worth coming back to. But that was the thing about blueprints. You drew the walls and the doors and the load-bearing columns, and then the building surprised you anyway. It became something people stood inside and looked up at. Something that made them feel, for a moment, like the sky was on their side. Cleo saved her work, closed the laptop, and grabbed her jacket. The pastry situation wasn't going to investigate itself.